All right. Well, welcome everybody. Top of the hour. I'm just going to wait for just a short moment here, maybe a minute or two, and just make sure everybody's connected and settled. Welcome to the Art of Race Day Performance, presented by Human Go, a human-powered health company. We have Coach Lance Watson and Dan Cohen on our call today. They're going to be sharing with you the art of race day performance, giving you some insider tips, some process, and some key information on how to make the best of your race day. It's really interesting. Actually, Lance and I were just chatting briefly before we got on the call today here about the difference between, a race goal where you have a very specific outcome and perhaps something that may be just a little bit more of a challenge. And I think it can be fun to throw those challenges in there, right, Lance, and maybe not necessarily know exactly what the outcome's going to be.
Well, that's right, Ray. Yeah. I mean, we're going to be talking today a little bit about, the Escape from Alcatraz, which is a very unique and challenging course. And it's when you're thinking about putting together your race season, it's good to have your local favorites, that you like to go back to and enjoy, and maybe a little bit less pressure and see your friends. And then, if you're trying to have success or have a PR, qualify for something, then maybe picking a race that suits your skill set. But also, I think it's really awesome to spice it up and find a race that maybe gets you out of your comfort zone a little bit, or you're going to see some different scenery or climb a really big hill, that kind of thing. And it's one thing to train to go fast, but it's another thing to just find different ways to enjoy that fitness you work so darn hard for.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Spicing it up, I think, is what you said there. Yeah, a little earlier, is adding those things that I guess create a little unknown for you. I like to take my
Perfect. This is
racing
the
onto
perfect
the
race for
dirt.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, the Escape from Alcatraz course kind of presents a lot of that, doesn't it? And I know Dan's going to cover this in our first section today. So yeah, looking at the key components of a race and what makes it so unique. So today we're going to give both Dan and Lance an opportunity to talk to the specifics of the Escape from Alcatraz course and, the profile and the specific demands of the race. But we also hope from today you're going to get some key takeaways and give you like a very clear path forward of maybe what you need to think about for any race up and coming. So yeah, the art of race day performance is absolutely about the Escape from Alcatraz, but it's also about any race that you might have on your schedule coming up here. So welcome everybody. We're going to cover a few key topics here today, and this is where I'm super excited to have Lance and Dan. Lance has coached people on the Escape from Alcatraz course. Dan has raced it. So we've got, quite a breadth of insider knowledge here about how to manage the specifics of Escape from Alcatraz, but also too broadly. Dan comes from a pro racing background and Lance from a professional Olympic level coaching background. So we have a lot of wealth of knowledge here to share with you today. So we're going to look at the course breakdown and winning strategies. And that's where I was talking to just before about, those key takeaways that you can apply to Escape, but also apply to any race day that might be coming up for you. We're going to look at gear, transitions and fueling for peak performance, a really fun one to break down. It's just sort of those three key components for peak performance. And then we're going to look at mental toughness, not just for race day. And I think this is where Lance's really high level insights into performance is going to come into its own here, where he's going to share not just poor performance as it relates to race day, but mental strategies for recovery as well. So some quite intriguing insights that Lance is going to share there today. We're going to wrap up with a nice 15-minute Q&A. So in between now and the end of our session today, go ahead and pop your questions in the chat and we'll hold on to those unless they're very, very specific to those three key topics that we're going to cover today. And then we'll wrap up with sharing with you a 25 discount code for Human Go. So just a brief, I would say, breakdown on who we all are and why we're here today. We've already spoken a little bit of Lance. Lance is globally renowned for his high performance coaching, both at the Olympic and international level. And Lance brings a wealth of knowledge over decades of coaching. So, you know, I think where the Q&A might come into its own here is after Lance shares his insights, is really take this opportunity to leverage Lance's knowledge in that space. And Dan Cohen, who is the Chief Performance Officer, an ex-pro triathlete at Human Powered Health. So Dan leads up many projects as it relates to human performance with our Human Powered Health company. And I'm Raeleigh Harris, the Master Triathlon Coach at Human Go. So today we're going to start out with the topic, cracking the code, and looking at race day strategies to help you plan for your next race.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, I'm Dan Cohen, the Chief Performance Officer at Human Powered Health. I've got involved in triathlon in the late 1990s. I think it was actually 1999, covering all distances. I've done the Escape from Alcatraz twice, many years ago. Same course, same challenges. It's a very unique experience. And I think anybody who is doing it for the first time is going to get a lot out of it, mentally and physically. And as Ray said, all of these strategies that we're going to cover can be applied to any triathlon. But for the purposes of this discussion, we'll keep it specific to the Escape. It is a very technical course. It is a strength and a power-oriented course. And it's something that you should be well prepared for, mentally and physically. The distances, as we know, 1.5-mile swim in the bay. The water is very chilly. An 18-mile, very technical bike course. And a 8-mile, very technical run course experience as well, covering everything from sand to the sand ladder to trail to pavement, etc. So lots of challenges and lots of excitement related to this race. So my first piece of advice for anyone who's doing the Escape from Alcatraz event is go to the pre-race meeting. I actually think it's a requirement. It was a requirement when I was doing the race, specifically because you're going to get the download of the course, but mainly you're going to hear from some individuals who know the currents of the bay incredibly well. When I was doing the race, there was a couple of individuals who regularly swim in the bay as their daily training. And so they know the currents incredibly well. If you look at the times of the swim course, it varies wildly. You can see anything from 15 minutes to 30 minutes for the professional athletes. And that ranges, even more variable for age group athletes. And it's all dependent upon the strength of the current. So go to that pre-race meeting and listen to the experts who will be able to give you some insight of how quick the race is going to be, and how strong the current is going to pull you, because it absolutely will pull you, and you will end up under the bridge if you're not careful. But it's very well organized. Just listen to the experts. So let's break it down. You're taken out by the ferry to close to Alcatraz Island. It's a 1.5-mile swim. You have the option of either jumping or diving. But let's talk about what you should be wearing before we go into those specifics. A wetsuit is an absolute must for this race, and I would say a full sleeve wetsuit. The water temperature varies, but it's typically in the 55 to 58 degree temperature. It's breathtaking, literally. So I would absolutely, if possible, practice going into cold water. So you're not just experiencing jumping in 55-degree water on race day. You can get creative. You can do a cold plunge. There's all kinds of different ways to experience that, but you should be mentally and physically aware of that sensation so that it doesn't catch you off guard. Sometimes you can wear the hoodies to keep you even more warm. I think that's just personal choice, but I would say a full sleeve wetsuit is an absolute must for the cold and to keep you obviously buoyant in the bays. It can get very, very wavy as well, which will affect your sighting. And so I would simulate as best as possible, difficult in a pool, but if you're in a warmer part of the country where you can get to a lake. I'm in Minnesota right now and I'm looking outside at a foot of snow. So obviously nobody's going into a lake anytime soon here. But if you can practice in a lake sighting often, because again, the current is going to be pulling you. And if you're not sighting often during this event, and your head is down and you're just swimming away following feet, you could be following somebody in the wrong direction. So sighting is going to be absolutely critical as well as part of your training for this event. You're taken out on the ferry and you're grouped by age group, and you'll be jumping off or diving off into the bay. I know it's a mixed bag. Some people prefer to dive right off into the bay. If you're going to do that, you absolutely should practice that because goggles can fly off and then you're sitting there treading water while other people are trying to jump into the water as well. It can get really complicated. So I'd say if you're a beginner, I would recommend highly jumping off feet first, making sure that you're spreading your arms out so that you're not going like an arrow down into the water. My first time doing this race, I wasn't comfortable diving. I did jump and I jumped almost straight down and I went down quite a bit. I came up and everybody was gone. So I lost about 10, 15 seconds. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to dive or jump, it's personal choice. As beginners, I would recommend just jumping off and practicing that in a pool so that you can come up and then just get into your groove and start following some feet. As I mentioned, sighting is going to be very important during this whole process. So make sure that you're practicing sighting and then you're able to get down into a nice rhythm, sight, and follow the individuals in front of you as long as they're going in the right direction. Once you're out of the water, it is a unique transition. There's about a half mile, I believe, between the swim exit and transition one. My recommendation would be to take your wetsuit off there so that you're not running a half mile in your wetsuit, which could slow you down. Whether or not you need shoes, that's your personal choice. From my understanding, the path between the exit and transition one is paved now. When I was racing it, it was pretty rough, and so shoes were more widely used. But I wouldn't hesitate for a second to bring an extra pair of shoes to put them there if you're just not comfortable running barefoot, because it is quite a distance. So that covers the swim. It is very well organized. So if you are a beginner and you're concerned about the swim, again, take your time. If you run into any issues, there are plenty of kayaks and boats out there that you can raise your hand and get support. The most important thing, I think, again, is the water is breathtaking. Practice getting into cold water so you're not caught off guard and you're not shocked when you jump in, okay? All right, so you're going to run about a half mile to your transition area where your bike will be set up. This is where you can make up a lot of time in the swim by having a very quick, efficient transition. I would keep your transition area very simple, with a towel, your helmet, your sunglasses, your cycling shoes, any nutrition that you might need, your run shoes, of course, your race belt. And once you get there, put all your gear down from the swim and start assembling your cycling gear, getting your helmet on, your sunglasses if you're wearing sunglasses, and your nutrition. The bike course is very technical. It is a lot of very extreme, sharp hills, downhills, corners. It is not the traditional triathlon specific course where you're down in your aero bars and you're on a flat course just powering through. Whether or not you even need a triathlon bike, that's up to you. I know there's plenty of people, at least when I was racing, that were using road bikes. But you certainly don't need to go out and buy a new bike for this event. But you might consider, and I would look into your gear selection, because it is a very aggressive course. So if you don't know a lot about bike gearing, I would talk with your local bike shop or someone who can take a look at your bike to make sure your gearing is set up properly. You have the right chainring on the front and your cassette on the back is set up appropriately so that when you do get to the hilly sections, you're able to get up those with a nice cadence and a rhythm, and you're not grinding through the gears, because again, you have to negotiate an 18-mile bike course and then a very challenging run, and you want to be able to save your legs for that. Take your time, be aware on this bike course. Stick to your own race. There's no need to take any unnecessary risks on this course, especially on the downhills when you're going down. There will be some individuals that will just bomb straight down, and you have to be very careful, hold your line and be confident and pay attention. On the bike, forward into the nutrition component of it, again, because it is an 18-mile bike, it's not an Ironman distance, 112 miles. You will need some nutrition on the bike. I would say you would need 1, maybe 2 water bottles max, to keep your bike weight down. And I would make sure that you have your nutrition appropriately placed on your bike or wherever you're keeping your nutrition, just so that it's easily accessible. Again, because this is a technical bike course, you're not going to be down in your aero bars all the time. It'll be difficult to get your nutrition in as you're, climbing a hill, you're drinking a water bottle, eating nutrition. And certainly when you're bombing down a hill, I would advise against doing anything from nutrition perspective. Keep that to the flatter areas, so that you're not having to, steer with one hand, on any technical areas of the course. Drafting, obviously that's a penalty. So make sure that you follow the rules, and when you are passing somebody, especially on the hill, pass them with authority, and then get back over into your line and just keep going. And then the run. So once you're done with the 18-mile bike course, you'll head back to transition. You'll rack your bike. You'll take off your helmet. You'll grab your race bib and any nutrition that you need for the run course, your shoes, and then you're off to the races. The first roughly 2 miles are pancake flat. So I would say use that as an opportunity to gather yourself. Don't take it out too hard, because again, once you're done with that 2 miles, the fun begins and you start to get into the hills, and you're on more of a trail section that is quite challenging. And you'll run through the trails, you'll go down onto the beach section. So you're going to be running in some sand, which is very difficult. You'll run to the turnaround, which is on the beach. You'll come back, and then you'll head to the notorious sand ladder, which is every bit as challenging as you might think it is if you haven't done it before. It's practically straight uphill. There are steps with sand on them, and you uh, have to pace yourself going up this hill, control your breathing. Again, you want to be able to save yourself for the back half of the course. And if you take that sand ladder too aggressively, once you get to the top, you have another rise that you're going to be going up, and it's going to be very difficult to get back into a rhythm if you take it too hard on that sand ladder. There are ropes, so I would say, hold on to those as a way to give yourself some leverage to help you up the sand ladder, and then have a strong finish on the back part of the course. All of this you can prepare for, and this is this plays very, very well into the specificity of training, meaning that the course is challenging, it's technical. There are elements like sand and gravel and trails and cold water. You can prepare for all of this. So I would look at the course and I would organize your training accordingly.
Spot on, Dan. And, training with Human Go, having the Escape from Alcatraz goal in your season means that you will get very specific sand type interval workouts prescribed for the run. You'll get those strength, punchy type bike rides in the training plan for the bike, and the longer swims to prepare you for that day where it's not in fact a quick swim. You could be out there for double the time that you anticipate because of the conditions out there in the bay on the day. So yeah, lots to pay attention to there. That was a fabulous high-level overview of what to consider when preparing for the Escape from Alcatraz race. But also, I think, some really good insights into what else to consider, at least the elements of another race course that you might be looking for your best performance as well. So, Lance, we're going to lead into now sort of the next level, isn't it? It's like, let's look at the gear, transitions. What am I doing there? How am I fueling for peak performance?
Awesome, Ray. Thank you. I feel like specificity is going to be the word of the day. Good points there, Dan, as well. Dan started to touch a little bit on gear. I want to take a bit of a deeper dive. And you're always considering what gear you need according to your key event, maybe your A race of the year. So if this is your A race, then you definitely want to make sure that you're dialed in for this. If you're doing the race to finish and enjoy, take a good look in your garage and talk to your friends and see what you can beg, borrow, and steal for the day. So getting in a wetsuit, Dan did mention full sleeve for sure for this particular race. When you're considering a wetsuit, know that wetsuit technology actually has really advanced over the last number of years. And if your wetsuit is old, it's brittle, or it has holes, you might consider either having it repaired or replacing it. It's good to replace your wetsuit every couple of years. A trick is, I mean, we all have our budget, of course, but a trick is that you get your new suit for season, and that's your race suit. And then you keep your old suit, and that becomes your training suit. So you're not so worried about getting little nicks and that. So keep that nice suit fresh. Of course, you want to make sure that you practice in it. Typically, a good fitting wetsuit feels a little bit almost tight to the point of being uncomfortable when you're on the shore. But once you get a layer of water in there, you get a bit of water in there, it tends to loosen up as well. Really good to practice in your wetsuit beforehand. Sometimes it feels a little tight on the neck if you haven't swam in a wetsuit in a while. And then when you add the cold water element, it's something that you want to be familiar with. But with practice, you do get acclimated to that. Generally speaking, if you're when you're talking about triathlon season overall, I'm talking to everybody here, If you are an overheater, some people say, well, is a long sleeve actually faster than a sleeveless? The answer there is yes, but if you tend to overheat in other swims, then maybe no, it may slow you down. Some of the wetsuit swims are like marginal as far as like borderline being non-wetsuit legal. And for a swim like that, if you get your core temperature up and then you're going into hotter day, you might consider swimming in a sleeveless wetsuit. Again, outside of Alcatraz, full sleeve for sure. And I love the idea of a neoprene hat. Lots of lubrication, Vaseline or Body Glide or whatever, not only helps you avoid chafing, but will keep you a little bit warmer too. Okay, thinking about goggles as well. Good to have two choices in your bag. You want to have a fresh set of goggles, ones that you're familiar with, not ones that you picked up at the expo the day before and never tried. But it's good to have a clear pair and a tinted pair according to what the conditions of the day are. So if it's high overcast, not great visibility, then going with a clear goggle. If you've got a bit of glare coming in off the water, then a tint is a better choice for you. So be aware of where the sun is going to be whenever you are doing a triathlon swim. Okay. Helmet. So again, a little bit of a climactic choice. Having put a lot of athletes in the wind tunnel over the years, one of the actually low-hanging fruit as far as free speed is an aero helmet. It does make a difference as far as how fast you go. And now that's with a little bit of a caveat that, especially if you have one with a bit of a tail on the end, you have to keep your head straight forward. Because if you are moving your head around, you're going to negate a number of the benefits of that aero helmet. So taking that a step further, when you consider something like Alcatraz, which is technical, up and down, cornering, sitting up, getting down low, you may be better suited to have something without a tail on the back or even something vented. Whatever you have in your garage is probably going to be just fine, but definitely make sure practice putting it on and off because sometimes those clips can be finicky, especially if your hands are cold. Cold weather gear. So if you're traveling for a race in general, it's good to make sure that you bring options for all conditions. And sometimes the swim might be okay, but it's really cold starting the bike. Sometimes the swim is cold, but then it's going to be a temperate day once you get out of the water. So you want to make sure that you have choices in your travel bag. And think about comfortable, tight fitting, and easy to get on and off. So something like a tight fitting bicycle jacket that you can just zip on in T1, it's worth maybe giving up, 15 seconds to get that jacket on to make sure that you're, warm enough when you start that bike. And then it's easy to peel off when you head off to the run too, if you need to get rid of it a little bit later. Another little trick that we use, some of the pros I coach and many of the age groupers as well, is if you're coming out of the water and it's cold in the morning, is actually cutting out a panel of plastic, maybe from one of the race bags that you get, something around the house that fits your torso, and it can actually sit underneath your tri-kit, and it makes like a windshield. And on a really cold day, I've actually have athletes put those panels inside their tri-kit bottoms in front of their thighs as well. It works remarkably well. It does stay in place underneath your wetsuit, but make sure, again, you practice with it at least once or twice before race day. Don't be pulling out any new hacks on race day. Hot weather gear as well. A hat with a brim, of course, glasses. Thinking about light color, but also to reflect heat, but also something that breathes really, really well. And, I guess I'm going to have to talk about running shoes, especially for this course as well. You want to make sure that you have a really well-fitting pair of shoes, and that might sound obvious, but when you're running around on sand, in particular, like your feet are going to move around a little bit more in your shoes. And you also have the opportunity maybe getting sand into your shoes, which can be problematic too. So you want to have a really well-fitting upper. And then you want to have, if you have a choice, something with a little bit of tread grip and something a little bit more stable too. I know a lot of the super shoes have a fair bit of squish and mobility, which is great on the hard surface, but you want to make sure that you feel comfortable running on a varied terrain as well. So takeaway on gear, very generally speaking, is make sure that you're considering the challenges of the race that you're going into, and think through swim, bike, and run, and make equipment selections according to the demands of that course, including choosing your gear ratio. That was a good one too, Dan. Thank you for bringing that up and mentioning. Transition hacks. Boy, I mean, big opportunity in T1. Practice running out of the pool. Now, you don't have to go run a marathon, but if you have not done a lot of swim, bike transitions, and in this case, swim, run, bike, run transition, you'll know you get a real spike in heart rate when you come up out of the water. And it's something that you can get used to, but sometimes you feel a bit dizzy, heart rate's a little bit high. And if you're a little bit cold as well, feet can feel like stumps as well coming out of that cold water. So practice running on the water, know exactly where you need to go. And I have a great story of being down in Ironman Brazil with an athlete. And this is a pro athlete I coached for a long, long time. He actually set the second fastest time of all time in this race. I coached him, as I mentioned, for many, many years, but I had the opportunity to actually run or walk through transition with him the day before when we was setting up. And he would walk a stretch, go to where the bags were. He would stop. He would close his eyes. He would visualize. Then he would go to the next spot where his bike was. He would stop. He would close his eyes and he would visualize. And he would be memorizing the most efficient way to get around transition and what he had to do every step. So the general overarching theme of transition is always think ahead. You know, sometimes you come out of the water and you give yourself a little pat on the back and a high five, and I did it. And then you're like, oh yeah, I still have to get on my wetsuit. and as Dan mentioned, get out maybe on the shore's edge too. That might be a little bit easier for you to run and get out of that suit. So always thinking ahead. Always take whatever your IQ is right now and cut it in half, because you are like stumbling around, and things that seem obvious the day before are not as obvious on race day. That's why you really want to be sure of where you're going. Find really obvious landmarks like a street light or a sponsored banner, count racks, count bikes. Make sure you run through it in if it's one transition. Some races are one transition where you go through in opposite directions. Make sure you go through both ways, know where the mountain line is, and try and really simplify. So I talked about traveling with gear choices, not bike gear, but clothing choices. But you don't want to have to make a choice when you come out of the water. So have your decisions made beforehand. Keep it as simple as you can. Don't panic rush. Be quick, be efficient, but be calm. And when you get to that mountain line, one little trick is, because it's the mountain line doesn't mean you have to get on your bike right there. So if you have a jam up of people, run another 50 meters, run another 100 meters, get on your bike there after it's spread out a little bit. It's safer, and really be heads up early in that bike, because again, people are moving blood from their chest to their legs, and they might be dizzy, they may be weaving and that. Some people are trying to get Garmin signals or Wahoo signals or whatever right out of the get-go. So just be really on the ball and really smart and really patient as you're working through that transition. Now, and I guess I'll talk about T2 as well. Again, spinning your legs out just a little bit as you come into the end of that bike, the last minute or so, just gear it down, find that run race cadence. Again, know exactly where you're going with your bike. Make sure you know where the dismount line is. Get off a couple of steps early. Try and find rhythm. Remember, this is a, think of an F1 pit stop, not a spa break. So always thinking ahead and try to be as efficient as you can, and have a set of shoes that are easy to put on. Elasticized laces are a great idea. For a sandy run like that, I probably would throw on a pair of socks as well, just to help avoid blistering. So that's a good synopsis of transitions. And Dan, you know, I know nutrition, race day performance nutrition is always a point that everybody is interested as well. You've got a lot of experience in that area, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on race day nutrition as well.
Yeah, and just one more piece on the transition piece. I just don't think you can say it enough. It's practice, practice, practice. It's free speed. It's free time. So as Lance said, just rehearse it, visualize it. I think it actually works when you do that and you get into a groove, and it's just what you do when you do a triathlon. It's the same thing. So nutrition, I'm going to keep this very, very high level. disclaimer, I am not a registered dietitian. So I'm going to just speak based off of what I know as an exercise physiologist and more high level, because I think everybody is different when it comes to nutrition. In general, endurance athletes should be looking at, roughly 30 to, call it 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. That's again a general estimate based off of your body size, how much you can take, what your gut is able to handle, etc. So that's anywhere from 120 to 100 or 360 or so calories per hour. But I know several athletes that can eat well beyond that. I know several athletes that take in less than that. So it's widely variable. But one thing is consistent: carbohydrates rule when it comes to endurance training. If you look at the research, carbohydrates are the number one fuel source that you're going to be consuming during endurance activities. Now, as an endurance athlete, you want to be able to maximize utilization of fatty acids, of fat, for as long as you possibly can, so that you're sparing your glycogen stores. And I think this is a perfect race um, that speaks to that, because it is a very high intensity race. And if you go too hard too fast, you will be tapping into your stored glycogen very quickly, which is stored carbohydrate, and you're using that primarily as fuel throughout the event. But if you are in the swim, really high heart rate, and you get out, and then you don't calm yourself down and you sprint to transition as fast as you can, you're going to be burning through your glycogen stores very rapidly. And then if you get on your bike, you go those first 2 miles really, really hard, you're going to be tapping into them even more. And once you get to the first hill, it's going to be a battle. So you have to pace yourself. Pre-race nutrition, again, you should be eating primarily carbohydrate based foods, with protein and fat mixed in as well. Um, I would recommend just doing some general reading, because it is variable. But you should make sure that your glycogen stores are topped off and ready to go, 1 to 2 days before your event. For this particular race, I would recommend keeping the nutrition to liquid or in gel form versus solid. It's not long enough that you would require, solid food. Of course, if that's what you prefer, you certainly can do that. But I would keep it very, very easy, as we talked about during the bike component, where you'll be getting your nutrition, and keep it easy so that you can just take a quick sip or a quick gel, and then get back into the rhythm on the bike. During the event, I would say, yeah, just stick with the, roughly 30 to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. You absolutely should be practicing what you're taking. I would not recommend just using what's on the course, what's provided in the course, unless that's what you practice with. As Lance just said in the last segment, it's advised never to try anything new during race day. And nutrition, I think, is the one area that you don't want to experiment. It can end up causing a lot of gastric distress and unnecessary performance decrements, when you can just practice it and know what you need to take, during your training. Whether you're using Precision or Morton or any number of products out there, that's personal choice. But I would say find what works. Eat at a regular interval, a regular cadence. So every 30 minutes, take a gel, as an example. Every 15 minutes, take a swig of your carbohydrate solution or water, whatever you're taking, and keep it regimented and consistent, so that based off of your training, you're getting this amount of calories in for this distance, and you've practiced it, and you know that's enough to get you through the race with the highest level of performance available to you. So that's what I would say. Are gels allowed on the course? Yes. I mean, that would be the first I've heard, if gels are not allowed on the course. Now,
Escape have a very specific policy with regards to access to that coastline where gels are not allowed. So
they're not allowed at all.
I would have to clarify that. It might be just one section of the course.
Okay.
But a good alternative to that, of course, is chews or a carbohydrate mix in a handheld.
You know, if gels specifically, I'm assuming because of the wrappers and people tossing them, what I would recommend in that situation would be just put it in your water bottle, right? Take the gels, squeeze them in a water bottle, fill it up with water, and there you go. You've got your gels in a more liquid form, but it'll get the job done. So.
Yep, absolutely. The gel flask is the way to go there.
Yeah.
Yep. And I would say because of the length of the run anyway, you're going to be using multiple gels. So
yeah,
have them in the one handheld.
Yeah, put it in a flask.
Spot on. Yeah, great. Well, I mean, I think, you know, as far as now starting to look at the absolutes and considering the surprises that Escape might present us on race week and even on the day, I think we've got a lot of really great takeaways there, things to consider. And I'm sure people are making a list of things to experiment with and clarify before race day. Thank you both, Lance and Dan.
Practice.
Absolutely.
Repetition.
Yeah. So the icing on the cake, Lance, mental toughness and how that relates to recovery. Please share.
Yeah. Thanks, Ray. Yeah, so you might say it's the icing on the cake, or actually some might say mental toughness is the cake and the outcome or the result might be the icing. And the reason for that is that if you are not in the right headspace, if you don't have the right mindset, it's really, really hard to get out and actually express or execute your fitness. So taking time to prepare and considering, what's our special word for today? Specificity, right? Considering the specific demands of the course. So first of all, making the shift to an A race mindset, that doesn't mean extra pressure. That means actually just a little bit more care and attention into getting yourself ready for the event. So everything from really learning the course to having some really clear positive affirmations and images of yourself going through the specific challenges of that course. Okay. An A race mindset might also mean spending time in practice, in training, not only simulating the demands of the course, but going through, there's a reason we call it mental training, and actually practicing where you want your head and your heart to be, where you want your focus to be, what you want your cues to be on race day. And I'll talk a little bit about how I would get some of my champion athletes ready to get out and really perform. And that is with the same caveat that I would ask a high-level international athlete to simply expect no more from themselves to get out and execute and express their fitness within a range of where they are currently at. So I want to make sure that you have that really close to you before you start your race, is that if you approach a race hoping to exceed anything you've ever done in training, as a Canadian, we say you are skating on thin ice because if things do not go perfect, you're going to fall through that ice and it's not going to go well for you. So be realistic in your expectations. Take a moment and reflect on your training and getting ready for the event, and bring either some metrics, some pacing ideas, and a general mindset to the start line. Now, how do you set up that mindset? Like I like to have my athletes go through 3 basic steps. Okay. And sometimes you read the 7 steps or the 12 steps. That's too many steps. Let's keep it at 3 steps. Okay. First, I call the foundation. It is your mental, emotional preparedness. It's a very internal sense of preparation. And why do we do this first? Because if mentally and emotionally you are not in the right headspace, it's pretty hard to get out there and compete and, you know, dominate or whatever. If you are stressed out, worried, sad, really angry, all those things are outside of what we call your optimal performance zone. Okay, so if activation is too high or if activation is too low, there is a U-shaped curve for performance where low, optimal performance, overactivated, and performance comes back down. Okay. So thinking that course through, including race morning, in a very simple term, what kind of mood do you want to be in? What side of the bed do you want to get out of that morning? Visualize it the night before. Think realistically about the environment that you're going to go into. Okay. Sun might not be up yet. There's going to be a lot of athletes milling around. There might be lineups for the porta potty. It might take you a while to get to your bike. Some people are going to be joking. Some are going to look like superheroes in costumes, like those totally jacked men and women who can almost be a little bit intimidating and throw you off your game. Some people are going to be completely stressed out. Some people are going to be. So this is not to psych you out. This is to get yourself ready for the environment that you're going to go into, and then to visualize, how do I want to handle myself in that environment before the race, as I'm getting ready to either walk down to the water's edge, or in this case, get on a boat and take the ferry out to that start line. Okay. Have a regrouping strategy as well. Okay. So I talk about reflecting on your training going in. Find your 3 or 4 or 5 best workouts and bring them with you in your mental back pocket, so that if nerves get up, you can take a minute, reflect back on those workouts, and gain some confidence. Ultimately, you're going out to swim, to bike, and to run like you do day in and day out in practice. So if you can simplify it a little bit that way and not blow it out of proportion. I'd like you to think through the race first, specifically as you can, thinking about where the challenge is going to be, where the hard hills are going to be. And I want you to think about how you are going to manage your self-talk, the kind of conversation you want to have with yourself, okay? How you're going to manage your focus, okay? And how you're going to basically take care of yourself. One great champion athlete I coached for a long time, Lisa Bentley. I'm stealing this quote from her, so I got to give it to her. She said, be your own best coach out there. So if you're out there and you're like, man, I'm planning next year's training already, or this is really hard, or she looks amazing, I should have done that extra workout. Those are all things you wouldn't want to hear from your coach on race day, right? So what kind of things would you want to hear from your own coach? And be your own best coach out there. If you start going down that rabbit hole of negative self-talk and worry, don't what I call it, don't double suck. I told myself I wouldn't say that. Now I am. So now I'm like kind of sucking twice. Okay. If you go down that rabbit hole of negative thought or worry, go, okay, that is normal when the body is under duress, not relevant to what I'm doing right now. Take a breath, refocus, and go back to some simple cues. Okay. I'm ready. I'm strong. I have a great skill set. I'm in great shape. Reminding yourself of some basic cues to bring yourself back. Think that course through from start to finish, and think about how you want to treat yourself, how you want to focus, where you want your head and heart to be. That is the foundation. The next level, Dan touched on it a little bit in his prep, internal technical preparation. Okay, so we're still not thinking about whose butt we're going to kick out there, or where I'm going to dominate that hill. Now I want you to think through the course again, start to finish, in segments. What will the first 400 meters of swim be like? What am I going to be seeing out there? How am I going to stay on top of my stroke rate from 400 to 1200? Where am I going to exit? What's going to feel like coming out of the water? Thinking the course through. What does early in the bike look like? That flat early run, and then I hit the sand ladder, the hills. Okay, where am I going to be in the course? How is fatigue going to build? Realistically, what is it going to feel like? And then what is my strategy for what I'm going to focus on? And how am I going to manage those different parts of the course within my skill set? Okay, with what I'm capable to do. So some people might be ripping down those hills. That might not be you. Or maybe you're a great bike handler and that's your opportunity. But again, think through the course very specifically. Think about how you're going to manage it with your skill set. And then if you have your foundation of emotional steadiness, you've thought the course through very well technically, how you're going to manage it, gearing, where on the course you're going to reach for your water bottle, all those finer points, the more specifically that you can visualize it, then you can get into that external tactical level of preparation. And that's kind of for the pointy part of the of the crowd out there. Not a lot of people are thinking about, am I going to podium? Am I going to win something? This particular course is not really a PR course, but you might want to try and go a little faster than you did last time. So in that case, you're going to think through the course again, and you're going to think about maybe where the challenging areas are and where the opportunities lie within your strengths. Okay, I'm a really good hill climber. I'm going to push those hills. Okay, I'm really good at handling my bike on the descent. So I'm going to take this line, I'm going to rail that corner. I'm not encouraging you to take risks out there, but think about what your skill set is. I'm a great hill runner. I'm going to go for it on the sand ladder. That's my opportunity to make up time. And then if you are really trying to dial it in, you're also going to look at maybe who's competitive in your age group, what their skill sets are, where you might have opportunities ahead of them. And then finally, I'd like to have you work backwards from the end of the run and go 400 meters or 400 yards from the finish, then go back a kilometer, 3/4 of a mile, and then go back a mile. And to visualize what those landmarks are that you might see out there and shifting a gear like you're a sports car. Okay, so when you get closer to the finish, you've got anaerobic capacity. That's another energy system. So I'm always like, okay, time to shut up, brain, and just go fast. I've got all day to recover. So work it back from the finish line, have some really specific landmarks, and then visualize shifting gears. I did this with Simon Whitfield, the Olympics. We walked through the whole course. We stopped, we visualized, we thought about where he was going to make his moves. And it was really interesting to watch the race play out. It was like clockwork. Whenever we hit a key point, he just went. So the power of mental rehearsal. Race day nerves, touched a little bit about that. Mostly just, think about your own best self out there. Maybe think about other times in your life when you're in a important situation, you really handle yourself well. And again, nerves come up, review your training, have a breathing strategy, 10 deep breaths, take some space by yourself, maybe put your music on beforehand, think realistically about the environment, have a regrouping, focusing strategy. The last one is recovery, bounce back. So there's a physical and a mental element to that. Physically, of course, it can be a little bit harder to cool down after a course like this, and you're probably not going to train seriously for a couple of days. So just if you can get in, not this water, but some water, maybe your hotel pool or something later in the day, that's great to go and kick your legs around, do a little bit of a water run, just move blood. Even going for a little walk in the afternoon can be really, really helpful. Optimally, if you can get out and ride your bike a little bit for half an hour, that's a great way to cool down too, but that's not always realistic in this kind of an environment. Making sure that you have your post-race nutrition ready. You have a window after the race, 30 minutes and 2 hours. High absorption of carbs in the first 30, and then you want to have some complex carbs and protein within 2 hours. That will cut your recovery way down. And then also even having something planned out and pre-made for when you get back home or to the hotel, so you're not getting out the bag of chips or whatever looks delicious in that moment. You're making a good choice. Mentally, I just want to reinforce this one more time. We do a lot well out there, okay? Even if it's just having the courage to get on the start line, that's a victory, and that's something that we want to learn from, okay? So when you're thinking about your race afterwards, when we have a hard day, if it's a tough day, we tend to turn it over and over in our mind, and we break it down, and what if this or what if that, or you might even feel defeated or whatever. But the reality is, while we want to learn from our mistakes, we actually really want to learn and own and put in our toolkit all the things that we do well, all the things that we did right out there. So I always encourage my athletes, no matter how the day went, for that first couple hours or whatever, even if you feel disappointed in your result, really focus in on what you did well, what you want to learn from, what you want to replicate next time. And then I would also say, even if I had an athlete win the world championships, I would high five them, I'd give them a hug, I'd say that was amazing. And then the next day I'd say, what do you think you could have done a little bit better? Was there some part of your game you could have smoothed out? And then you can get into the post analysis and the learning from and trying to improve. These races they feel like big moments when you're in them. And, let's face it, we train hard for them. They're a big milestone in our calendar. We're getting out of our comfort zone. That's what makes it such a cool accomplishment when you get to that finish line. Okay. But always remember that in the big picture of your athletic journey, they are a stepping stone. So do the best you can, get out and express your fitness, treat yourself really, really well. And then after the race, learn as much as you can, chalk another one up. No, in the very least, I got a great workout, and move forward onto the next one. Always building your skill set, always building your fitness, always building the mental toughness element of yourself as an athlete and your persona. So with that, Ray,
Yeah,
I think we're getting to the end of our presentation. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. As an athlete who I'm racing Escape from Alcatraz this year, as well as hopefully everybody on the call today. And as I was starting to shift my mindset into my A race, and I could feel my heart rate come up, and I could start to see some of those key, points in on the course, because I've done it a few times, and it showed me that even though I've done the race before, I still need to go through that rehearsal. I still need to consider that strategy. So thank you for that. I mean, that was a really powerful share there. Thank you so much. I would also say we have had, we're just above, we're 4 minutes before the top of the hour. We did get some Q&A come through, but what I wanted to share for those people that need to jump, I think we'd advertised that today was going to be an hour long, is that we have a 25% discount off of HumanGo. You can use that code RaceDayWebinar25 to get access to HumanGo. We have an Escape from Alcatraz specific training program. So make sure that when you sign up, you register with that race plan. That will make sure that you get those race specific workouts that both Lance and Dan spoke to today: the sand, the hills, the punchy climbs, the technical aspects of what it's going to mean for you to perform well on race day. And make sure that you look up the Escape from Alcatraz community or group in the app as well. I manage that group. It's a wonderful platform to ask questions about the race and about the training journey that you're on. Lance has access to that as well. So if you do have very specific questions for Lance, I encourage you to pop them in there. I think that's a super exciting way of not just communicating with your broader kind of high level help and assistance at HumanGo, but also to learn from each other, because I know that there's people on this call that have done Escape before, like me, but I feel like the learning journey is just never ending, honestly. It feels like there's always something new to take away. So make sure that you jump into the Escape from Alcatraz group in the app as well. So Lance, I'd like to ask a question for you. It's a bit of a technical one. It has to do with bike choice. So the question came in, do you have any suggestions of what type of bike to use? And if you have both a TT and a road bike, is it really course specific for this one? And I would also probably add to that, how athlete specific is this choice?
Yeah, awesome question. I know Dan touched on it a little bit earlier. A lot of athletes are choosing to ride road bikes on this particular course because it is so hilly and so technical, which means there's not as much time actually sitting in the aero bars, and your ability to be comfortable, to descend well, to handle corners, to be able to get out of the saddle and climb. I know personally, if I had a choice, I probably would be geeking out and getting on a road bike with some clip-on aero bars in case I had a chance to jump in there every once in a while. But the other thing too is, hilly course, especially if you're a smaller athlete, but this goes for all athletes, but especially if you're a smaller athlete, maybe smaller woman or whatever, the weight of your bike really makes a big difference as well. Especially riding it uphill, lifting uphill. So typically road bikes are lighter than triathlon bikes as well. So that's another advantage. And I mean, if you want to dial into equipment to like having a really nice light set of wheels, that makes a big difference. Some aero wheels are great as well, but a light set of wheels on this course, you've got the centrifugal force of the wheel spinning. So weight in the wheels is actually a little bit more exponential sometimes.
Yeah, I would say, Lance, I agree with you entirely here. If you can get your hands on a set of wheels, that's again, like transition, it's free time. So
yes.
if you can borrow a pair of carbon fiber race wheels, that would be ideal with the appropriate gearing cassette on there. So
yeah, and really good tires.
yes, really
Because
good
it could be
tires.
wet.
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah.
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 Super. Thanks for that answer. I would like to just thank everybody, and please, anybody, we've got a couple more questions to ask both Lance and Dan here. So if you'd like to, stay on the call, please stay on. For those of you that have to jump, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you've got a wealth of knowledge to apply both to the Escape from Alcatraz race, but any race up and coming. And thank you, Lance and Dan, for joining us today. Another question I have, which is probably, I'm guessing, a little bit more to do with the absolutes of the race course. So what is the distance on sand versus trail versus paved? And I think this was probably one of the biggest surprises for me when I first raced the Escape from Alcatraz race. It wasn't so much the sand ladder, which was hyped up. It was the fact that I needed to run for so long in the deep sand before I got to the sand ladder. Mm-hmm. And then once I reached the top of the sand ladder, I wasn't done with the climbing. And the climbing that came after the sand ladder was still on compressed gravel and a little bit technical. Dan, you talked about the technical part of kind of where you're on it's not like forest trail, but it's not a flat surface either. So you really need to be paying attention.
Like a city park, basically, kind of up in the hills, basically. Yeah.
Spot on. Massive mix of decomposed granite coming out of T1 and back into the finish line. And that's a very long stretch. We also have another set of technical stairs in the course. So, I mean, my overarching comment there is more than a comment, because I don't know what the actual percentage of breakdown is study the map. Know what those surfaces are, what those segments are. Like I said, that decomposed granite is a sort of a false up and a false down. Feels like it goes forever, because particularly when you're coming to the finish line, you can see the finish line just there, but it's actually quite a way away. You also have a big switchback coming back up to as you climb up to the bridge level and into the park. So I think there it's such a personal thing. Know what you're getting yourself into and prepare yourself for those bite-sized pieces or those chunks of the course that have a different requirement. And I guess, Lance, that talks to your shoe choice that you mentioned earlier as well. Make sure it's a good fitting shoe, maybe one that has a little bit of grip if that's an option, because you might end up with sand and gravel in your shoes, and socks are probably a good idea, especially if you haven't trained a lot without them. Yeah. If you've got anything to add to that.
Great point. I just might say take some pride in having maybe a versatile run skill set as well. So when you get on that flat section, think, okay, I'm a road runner now, and I'm going to focus on posture and cadence and maybe stride it out a little bit more. Still pacing, as Dan said, it's early. And then when you get on that sand, be careful not to overstride and try and power it out through the sand. Really, really rely on cadence and turnover and quick, light feet as you're trying to skim through the sand versus plow through the sand. Going up steep hills, listen to your respiratory rate. Sometimes it's faster to walk than run, and that's a general one. If you're starting to hyperventilate, that means you're anaerobic and you need to back off a little bit. That being said, also just be really determined. Sometimes if a downhill's coming too, you will get a bit of recovery. So it might be worth burning a match and pushing it a little bit up and over that hill. Yeah.
And I would say, just during your training, make sure you're incorporating strength sessions into your training. That should just go without saying for any specific training program, endurance training program, but because this is a power oriented course, I would recommend, doing the appropriate strength training as well. And you can, as Ray said, get that strength element from Human Go if you would like to use that as a tool. But I would say strength training is very important.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, and in the Escape from Alcatraz plan, the option is there, but I also know that triathletes tend to kind of leave the strength training to the bottom rung and often miss it completely. And I would say of any course, this is one that fourth discipline is really critical for success.
Yep.
Well said, Dan. So I'm going to maybe just one last question here, and this one. They said, this person, sorry, I don't have your name, said, hi, thanks for the webinar, very, very useful. One question regarding the swim. How much interaction is to be expected from wildlife? Of course, we're in the San Francisco Bay, right?
I wouldn't, well, Ray, I don't know about you, but my 2 years, it was never a concern, never an issue. I mean, of course, there's wildlife in the Bay, but I wouldn't even have that as a consideration of worry.
Well, no, I think this kind of ties into Lance's mental prep as well. Not to postulate Escape from Alcatraz as the most surprising race I've ever done, but it is probably one of the most surprising races I've ever done, from the impact of the cold and the conditions and the course profile. It's a thinking athlete's race, and so I would say anticipating a flyby by something dark underneath you is a possibility. I've swum in the bay many times, done the Escape from Alcatraz swim from the island to the shore many times, and 3 or 4 times I've seen a seal come in underneath me at quite some distance. They're just doing their thing. That's what's going on. They're out there doing their thing as we're out there doing ours. And so I can say that if I've prepared for that, then when I experience that, it's like, oh yeah, that's the seal doing its thing, to be expected. And I don't experience that, maybe sudden heart rate that I've got to get back under control.
Yeah.
I think it's a question like that probably also speaks to, maybe I'm interested in what wildlife is down there, but I'm probably actually just thinking about, I'm going to be out in the ocean, and I'm a little bit worried about that. And I think it's really good if you have something that is gnawing at you or a little bit of a worry, not to like try and shovel it aside and hope it doesn't happen on race day, because it does. If it does, it's going to amplify. So in this case, yeah, like you say, Ray, thinking about, okay, there's a seal down there doing its thing, whatever. You're probably not going to see anything. But sometimes you're out in the water and you're like, you're looking down into the dark and you're like, I wonder what's down there, right? And that's where, maybe the Jaws music starts playing in the back of your mind, or right?
I've done that. I've done that.
I always have in the lake, I'll get a Jaws music sometimes too. Yeah. So I always have a real simple refocus, and I'm just like, you just got to go back to a mantra and be like, left arm, right arm, left arm, right arm, left arm, right arm, something really, really simple that just switches your brain off and helps you get into almost like a rhythm, so you're not thinking about it. But definitely, if you're worried about it, visualize even having the nerves come up on race day and think about, how am I going to regroup? Even if I have to get onto my back and swim a little bit of backstroke, or just breathe for a second, catch your breath, get yourself regrouped, and get back, and then just start swimming at a nice aerobic pace and get back going.
Yeah, spot on. Pair of the mind. Well, with that, thank you very much, Lance. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us and sharing your wisdom today. Like I said, we hope that you take advantage of the Race Day webinar 25% discount if you're already in Him and Go training for Escape from Alcatraz. Make the most of those race-specific workouts that you're being prescribed now, and make sure that you jump into the group and stay connected both with all of us and your fellow athletes for Race Day. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have fun.